Hello, it's me from the future. I say me from the future, it's me from the present, here with the little Nameless N47. The reason I'm here now is to explain that what you're about to see is me in the past. I filmed the first part of this video where I'm showing you it and went out for a fly on the 5th of November back in 2019. And as you're about to see, in my very first flight, things didn't go well. And this ended up sitting there until it could be repaired. And then I tried to go out again and then conditions went right. And then we had the global pandemic and I've only just been able to go out to fly it. So you'll see me in the past, treat it as if it was the past and I didn't know what was coming, and then I'll be back to see you afterwards to tell you what I thought of it. So jump cut to me in the past. Hello, today we're going to be looking at what's in this unassuming box, but just before we get into there, a quick reminder to please like or dislike this video if you don't like it. Comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and if you can find it, click on the little bell icon, it'll tell you when I'm uploading stuff. What we have here is the NamelessRC N47. NamelessRC are a brand of full speed RC. I thought I recognised the very plain box there. But essentially this appears to be a HD version of a toothpick quad, which is quite an interesting prospect. As per usual with the stuff from full speed RC, there's nothing fancy in the box here. In fact, we've got a couple of little extra bits as a review model, which is an extra canopy, you can have it in red, and an extra frame. You don't get those bits if you buy it retail. So in the box here is the quad itself. We'll come back to this in a second because the other things you get is the little OSD board for the Caddx Baby Turtle, piece of foam padding for the battery, one of those horrible battery straps I really don't like, and this stuff to keep the wires nicely against the frame. But let's have a look at the little quad itself, which looks like this. It's quite high, isn't it, with this baby turtle taking up the stack. What we have in here is the normal 65mm props that come with the toothpicks. These are from GemFan. I don't think I've used GemFan ones before, so that'll be interesting. We have 1103 8000 kV motors, pretty tiddly and good for 2S or 3S according to the specs. This particular one I've got as the FreeSky compatible receiver, which is the little sort of D8. Not a huge deal of range, but you've also got the option of receive free. There's a crossfire option, DSM2 and DSMX, and FlySky. 105mm motor to motor. As many of these toothpick types, this uses an all-in-one flight controller, F4 flight controller with ESC board, and it uses these little connectors as often the case, and the sort of diagonally orientated board. So this is a 12 amp ESC board with F4 flight controller as mentioned. The VTX is called the Nano 400. It will do 25 to 400 milliwatts of power, although they always come locked and you have to hold some button in to unlock it and stuff. And of course we've got the Baby Turtle. Always a little bit nervous when we come to all-in-one HD and FPV cameras, because normally the FPV image is very bad, but you can kind of work around it. We've had reasonable goes with the Turtle before that have come in quite nice. I'd be interested to see what this one's like. I've never had the Baby before, so yeah, should be interesting. I mean, it does. The only thing I would mention, it looks very sort of top heavy. The stack's almost as tall as it is wide, which is curious looking. But yeah, let's get up and be the flight. Let's get it bound up, see what we have to do, and take it for a fly.
In order to bind, you're probably going to need to take the top off. And just to let you know, in case it wasn't obvious, these screws go all the way up, and if you just undo it a little bit, what you've got in the canopy section is these little captive nuts there that go in. So if you just unscrew a little bit down, careful not to lose these little bits, and you'll be able to get down and do the bind. You've also got the connector here to do any of the settings if you want to on the Caddx Turtle. So while you've got the top off, you might want to do anything you want to there, which I'm just about to look at too.
Okay, well I've just bound the receiver, so let's have a quick look in Betaflight and see what's going on before I make my changes. The actual USB is quite recessed. My normal cable wouldn't quite go in far enough, so I had to use a different one. Just something to bear in mind. Maybe my original one was a little bit short, but check that out for yourself. Anyway, ports wise, serial RX because it's a D8 type receiver, and the VTX uses the RSE Tramp protocol. In config, the props are reversed, which is interesting. D-Shot 600, I'm going to add motor stop, an 8K 4K loop with arming at 180, which is good. The craft name is what you might expect it to be called by default. I'll obviously change that about. and it's set up for anti-gravity and dynamic filter with RX set as the beeper, which is good. Power and battery 3.3, 4.3, reasonably sensible. I think this takes a high voltage battery. If so, I might just boost that a little bit more, but I'll check that first. PIDs, you know what? The Betaflight configurator has changed so much now that I don't know if this is standard PIDs or not. It looks kind of different. The rate profiles certainly had some changes there. They've for some reason boosted the RC rate and put the super rate downwards in order to get 800 max degrees, which is a weird way of doing it really, as opposed to having a straight RC rate and a higher super rate. I don't know if that makes a difference, but there you go. I might do some messing around with that. I normally fly with a super rate of 0.8 and a max velocity of 1000 degrees, although this is on an HD system, so it's a question of do I want more smoother or do I want to stay with the sort of normal acro fly. Don't know yet, but that's a good thing about having multiple rate profile settings. Receiver, as I said, we're bound up. I've just got a couple of sub trims to do. Channel map is AETR by default. The RSSI channel is correctly set up on aux5 and you can see it bouncing about there. All good. And mode, fairly sensible actually. They've got ARM, beeper, flip over crash and VTX pit mode, which is quite useful. And follows through to the OSD as well, which is pretty sensible. Nice, gives you lots of real estate with nothing there. All the important information down the bottom. I tend to spread this around, but generally I find that if you're going to look, it's easier to glance at the bottom than the top, so I put the most important things at the bottom, like voltage. But yeah, some messing to do there, but not an awful lot. I'll show you what that looks like when I actually fly it. Anyway, I'll set that up and we'll get on and actually fly this thing. So just before we actually go flying, I mentioned setting up the Caddx Turtle, and you should definitely want to do so because what you start with is some of the Caddx stuff all over the screen. There are certain things you can't get rid of on the Caddx Turtles, and that's mostly the recording indicators, which generally will go over the top of your OSD, but you can move your OSD about. But the things I wanted to set up here are things like the 16:9 ratio, and then I wanted to remove as much as that information from the OSD that I could. So I won't go into great detail here because I've gone through this Caddx cameras before and they've got a lot of settings. But yeah, essentially all I did was I set loop recording to off. I made sure it was on 1080p 60 frames a second, and then I went in and I turned off the pilot name, the timer and the internal voltage, all which would have been quite useful I guess if you didn't have an OSD, but it's really difficult to imagine flying a quad without one these days. So that's all set up. Now it's time to fly. Okay, so we're off and running, and I just wanted to give you a flavour of the sound you have, although that was it turned down to about 50%. Basically, you're going to have a very loud, angry sounding wasp in there. Now, this first part of the flight, you'll notice is on HD because I managed to not record my DVR, and this is voice out from 2020, flight from 2019. I'm just testing the range of this receiver. This receiver's good for, you know, a couple of 100 meters. It's a proper actual receiver, so it's not an SPI. It will go much further than that. It will drop the RSSI very low, so it's always a little bit sort of nervy flying it because it's like, what's going to happen? But you can see here I'm starting to speed up and we're starting to get a few shakes in the camera. And this is literally my maiden flight. And I should just explain how it works when I go out flying. Essentially, what I try and do is be quite careful on the first couple of batteries because I want a certain amount of footage for the review of, you know, me flying around generally and doing a couple of sort of set maneuvers, if you like, just to make sure it's all good, just in case I happen to crash it. On this occasion, something went a bit wrong and I managed to crash it on its maiden flight. And it's a maneuver that I've done hundreds of times on lots of different quads. I have come unstuck occasionally, but on this one I basically completely misjudged it. And this is what it is. It's a power loop over this tree, in which case it didn't quite go over the tree but went into the tree. I had to say I wasn't especially worried. I've been in trees lots of times and everything in my quads is set up with turtle mode, not so I can flip it over, just so I can make sure I can try and flip it out of any tree no matter how I'm orientated, but this was stuck. And as time went on, aside from the battery dangling out, we got less response from the motors because the props were just breaking off. Well, this is going a bit wrong. Up there, we maybe just be able to see a light, is a quad. And it's kind of moving a bit, but it's got like approximately one prop left. And it seems completely caught in there. So I guess at this point I start throwing sticks up there, see what happens. So I threw things at it for about an hour and it was completely stuck. So I went home, I got this bit of rope and a socket to use as a weight and threw it into the tree over and over again. And I literally caught that branch and shook it violently and it just wouldn't come out. It was completely stuck. I practically had to hook the quad before it eventually came out. It had more props intact than I thought. They were all knackered, of course, but the one problem it had was the one motor without a prop. Basically, the motor shaft was completely sheared off, so at this point I needed both one new motor or motor shaft and a whole set of new props. Should also point out that when I talk about recovery of quads, I'm not just talking about how difficult it is to retrieve things from trees. The area here is completely full of like brambles and thorns, so even just going around on the ground I'd managed to cut my hands and my legs were all scratched up through my trousers and everything. Really very unpleasant recovery indeed. I'd prefer to lose a quad where I couldn't find it than have it where it was stuck in a tree and I just couldn't get it though, so glad I got it down eventually. Okay, so we're finally up to 2020 in January and I've got the replacement motor, I've got replacement props. What I didn't have is a weather window. I thought I might have had, but looking at the conditions here you can literally see the moisture starting to appear on the screen and getting worse. You can also see that this is the DVR footage. I think on this occasion, I don't know if I didn't have an SD card in or I didn't bother recording it, but I've only got DVR footage. So for the first flight, only HD. For this one, only DVR. But it allows you to see that the things we can't never get rid of with the turtle or the baby turtle is the recording indicator and the recording timer. But what I could have done is move my OSD about so it wasn't blocked. But it's a little unfair to judge it from this. It seemed to be flying okay, but really you can't see anything. And I can mostly blame that on the rain. So after this, I went on holiday and then I came back and we had a global pandemic. And fast forward on to last week where I finally got to try and fly this thing properly. Well, literally months in the making, because I got this months and months ago, and then on my first flight I crashed it in a tree, broke a motor, I had to wait for new motors, then the pandemic happened, and bad weather and stuff, and finally we're here to try it again, the Nameless N47. Can't remember anything about it other than the fact I crashed it in a tree. It's got one of the little baby turtles in, it's got its own little receiver, and it's sort of 2S, 3S little toothpick with it's a bit heavier because it's got quite a big stack there, as you can see, but let's hook it up and put some batteries through and see how it does. Well, recently I reviewed the Eachine Lal 3, which also had a Turtle V2 camera, although it didn't even have the setup thing to change it. And a lot of you guys said to me, oh my god, that is the worst picture I've ever seen. Well, the N47 has a worse picture than that. It is really quite challenging. We've got it on 25 milliwatts power at the moment, but you can see those trees, are they really there? I'm only sort of about 30-40 meters away and there's a lot of noise. When I go into shadow here, it's like I don't know where I am. Fortunately, I've got some memory of what that looks like. Out in the sun, it's not too bad, but as soon as you get into shadow or any sort of dim light or more than 50 meters away, it's tricky. That said, toothpicks like this fly pretty nicely. They're good fun to fly, but only when you can genuinely see where you're going. And on this, I am really struggling, and it is quite a nice sunny day, but it is very challenging. So let me pump the power up to 200 milliwatts and we'll see what a difference that makes. So here we go with the VTX power pumped up to 200 milliwatts and things are getting a lot better there. it doesn't solve, you know, the fact that it doesn't handle the light very well, but at least we're not getting breakup on top of that, which is a lot better. So what about the HD footage? Well, let's overlay and I'll show you what we get. So the Caddx Baby Turtle is not bad at what it does. It gets a nice 60 frames per second. It does 1080p. It's quite susceptible to little bumps and vibrations though, and unfortunately that sort of conditions is what a toothpick quad will produce, because it's got these props that generally do flex and warble a bit, and so you're always going to get slightly bumpy looking footage. And it's kind of like, well, what's important to you here, the HD footage or what you get through the camera? And the camera is challenging to fly FPV. When I'm flying this way along where the sun is not in the best position, it is really quite challenging to see where I'm going. I'm pretty much using memory to decide what's there, because it is tricky. The actual flight though, it flies quite nicely. It flies like a toothpick. It's a little bit heavier than it needs to be because it's got extra camera in it, but you know, it does an alright job. I'll show you the last flight I did. This is battery number 4, and I think I'm using 300 milliamp hour high voltage batteries. I just wanted to see what sort of a thrust we'd get from full throttle, and you can see that, yeah, it's pretty good, but we get plenty of vibrations. And again, I would expect this because it's a toothpick, but when we look back at the HD footage, it's going to look shaky. And people are so crazy about, oh, it must be smooth now. I just don't know if this has a place, because when you're talking about getting HD footage back which is shaky on a quad, people just expect everything to be perfect. They expect GoPro 7 black hyper smooth stuff. They expect real steady stabilization, and we're just not getting this on this quad. So for me, my priority is seeing where I'm going and having fun rather than trying to share HD footage. If I think a flight's particularly nice, I might share the DVR footage, because I tend to think DVR footage is interesting because you're seeing exactly what the pilot's seeing. That to me is more interesting than seeing, you know, the hyper smoothed, real steadied sort of stuff you're getting there. I like to see it raw if I'm going to see flight footage from anybody. But you know, if this is what floats your boat, that's what you're getting from it. I do not like the Turtle V2. I like the Tarsier because it's got a proper FPV lens and another lens for HD footage. I don't like single lens HD and FPV combination footage. But there you go. I managed to go out, fly it, only 9 months late, and I got 4 batteries through it, and I didn't even crash it or anything. Well, when I say I didn't crash it, landings on this were a bit of a challenge, so it's kind of a fact that there's my landing mat, stop rotating and drop down. But you know, that doesn't count, does it?
So there you go, that was my review of the Nameless N47, just to prove we get there in the end. If you just give us, you know, 7-8 months or so, we'll get there. What did I think of it? Well, as a toothpick, it flew, and it flew fine. As a recording camera, it definitely recorded stuff, but the things don't mix. Here's the problem. Toothpicks, the sort of traditional ones, this sort of size with the 65mm props, they go mentally fast RPM, and basically these props aren't stiff enough. They tend to warble at high RPM, and this basically means that the camera is going to get some shakes because there's warbling props there. So putting an HD camera on something where you're going to go crazy like this is pointless. It's fine if you fly it like really slow, but then you're really looking at being like a Cinewhoop. You'd want tri-blade props, you'd want something a little bit more controllable. The whole idea of toothpicks is that you can fly them crazy stupid. Without the HD camera, you know, I just take into account the fact it's going to wobble a bit, but it doesn't matter because I'm on this sort of crazy ride. This doesn't work because it's got that HD camera in there. You're wanting to get decent HD footage, and you just can't get it from this unless you fly really slowly, and then you're not getting the idea of a toothpick quad. The other thing is the Baby Turtle. It's awful. It's awful to fly. It's great for getting HD footage, but what's important when we're out flying? For me, it's the most important thing is to obviously be able to see where I'm going. And with this, I just can't. I can't see well enough, and it's not fun. It's not fun if you can't see. There's no point to it. To the point that now I'm not going to be reviewing anything that comes with a single lens HD and FPV
camera unless they say to me, we've done something amazing. It looks like as good as an FPV camera now, and it records, because they're just all crap in my opinion. They're not good enough. For my money, I'd always get a decent camera that I could look through, and if it didn't record HD, it's like, don't care. At least I'm flying and I'm having fun, because with these I'm just not having fun. It's not good enough. I really like their other toothpick quads, but that's because they didn't put an HD camera on them, and they were like, you know, they're a bit wobbly and stuff, but that's a toothpick quad for you. It's wobbly. But unfortunately, I just wouldn't put an HD camera on there, and not with these sort of props, not with this sort of dimensions. That's just my 2 cents. Anyway, this was kindly supplied by NamelessRC, and there are links down below for where you can check it out in more detail, and check out their other quads, because they're a lot better without the addition of that Turtles camera. Hope that's been helpful. I hope you weren't all waiting 9 months to look at this. It might be a bit old now. I don't even know if they sell it anymore, but you know, I like to finish these things off. Anyway, hope that's been helpful. I'll catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.